Number 1. Fog Walk. I only had one really unexplainable experience in my life. It happened one night when my family was spending time at my aunt's house out in the country. She lived along a gravel road at the bottom of some hills. I always enjoyed visiting her because she lived way out in the middle of nowhere, and I always found it really nice and peaceful. I was 16 years old when this happened. I had been having problems sleeping even before we went to visit my aunt, so I can't think that the reason that I wasn't sleeping was because we were there. But on the first night there, I wasn't able to sleep. However, everyone else in the house was sleeping just fine, so I didn't have anyone that I could contact. My brother was sleeping on the couch in the living room, so I couldn't watch the television, and I was in a bedroom with my cousin, who was sleeping soundly, so I couldn't turn on the light and read a book. But after tossing and turning for a couple of hours, I knew that I had to get out of bed and do something. There wasn't much I could do, so I decided to go out and go for a walk. Immediately after walking out of the house, I noticed that it was sort of foggy outside, but there was some light because the moon was rather full. I wasn't worried about being able to see because it wasn't that bad, and there were occasional light posts, although they weren't very common. I also only planned on walking along the road and not turning up into the hills for any reason. It had to be past midnight at that point, maybe even around 1 o'clock in the morning. There were very few houses along the road, and the one or two that I passed did have the lights on the outside, but it didn't affect the atmosphere very much. After walking for a little while, I saw something up ahead of me in the fog. The fog wasn't particularly thick, so it was easy to see not only where I was going, but things that were in the fog. And way up ahead of me, I noticed that there was something moving. It was hard to make out at first what I was seeing, but after a while I noticed that it was the shape of a person who was walking along the other side of the road. He was walking toward me. It was a little scary at first. I didn't honestly believe that the person was dangerous at all. I had no reason to think something like that. The area was so nice and safe that people slept with their doors unlocked. But the reason it was scary was how it looked. It was foggy with scattered light from the moon, and it looked more like a shadow walking toward me. I figured once we caught up to each other, we would just say something like, "Hey, foggy night, huh?" and then keep walking. It was not a big thing. What seemed odd to me, though, was that as we got closer and closer to each other, it didn't get easier to make the figure out. It was still a dark and fuzzy-looking shadow that was walking toward me. It was very quiet out that night, and I could hear the crunching of the gravel against the road as he was walking on it. So when the guy was probably about 20 feet away from me, he still just looked like a shadow in the fog. But I didn't think much about that. What did surprise me is that he suddenly just wasn't there anymore. The figure was gone. The crunching sound of his footsteps was gone. He was just gone. I stopped walking for a moment, just surprised at what I had seen. He was walking along the side of the road facing a field, but there wasn't any reason I shouldn't have been able to see him if he had run out into the field. I was walking alongside the side of the road against a hill. He couldn't have crossed the road and ran up the hill or anything like that without me noticing it. I went over to the spot where he disappeared and looked around, thinking that he might have fallen down or something, but I found nothing. I looked hard, calling out for him, but saw nothing and got no response. The shadowy guy that I had seen walking toward me had just vanished into nothingness. It was at that point that I got scared and decided to go back to my aunt's house. I hadn't been scared walking out there in the fog before. However, on the way back home, I was really nervous. I kept looking over my shoulder at every moment, if I had heard a strange sound or something, and it was a scary experience wondering what it was that I saw. Could it have been a ghost or something? I knew for a fact that there was no way that a person could have disappeared the way that it did. I got back to the house and eventually was able to go to sleep. However, it wasn't the most sound sleep ever. The next morning I told everyone what had happened. My family believed in ghosts and things like that, but my aunt claimed to never have had any experiences like that at all while living out there. I'm pretty sure they all believed me though, and at the very least it gave me an interesting story to tell people. Number 2. The noise. When my boy Matt was only 6 years old, he started developing a fear of something under his bed. I always checked it for him every night before bed. There was never anything under there, not even toys. But there were occasions when he still told me things about something being under his bed. For a while, it was just that he heard things under there. I tried to explain to him things such as a house settling, but he was confident that the noises he heard from the stairs when the house was settling were a lot different than the sounds he had heard under his bed. When Matt heard those noises, he wouldn't get out of bed. He was scared something or someone was under there, and he would either scrunch up against the wall, or he would call for one of us to come in and check under his bed for him. And of course, there was never anything that was under the bed. These happenings would not occur every night, though. Days and sometimes even weeks would go by with no incidents. But normally, as soon as I forgot about what happened, I would hear Matt tell me at breakfast that it happened again, or I would hear him screaming for me or his father to come into the room. After a while, his older brother began making fun of him. That just made Matt a whole lot worse. And of course, since I couldn't be around 24 hours a day, I couldn't keep his older brother from picking on him all the time. I came up with a weird punishment one day, however. I made my son switch rooms for a week. Robert was 3 years older than Matt, and he always put on a brave front, mocking his brother for being scared of something under his bed. But he was still just a little boy, and I think he was a bit scared to have to sleep in that room. For the first few days sleeping in his brother's room, Robert did not have any problems. His punishment was sleeping in there for a whole week. On the 5th morning, though, at breakfast, Robert stopped making fun of Matt. When he came to breakfast, he seemed a little off. To make things clear, he never said that he had heard anything happen under the bed. The only thing that changed was that he never said a word to Matt about it again, and that made me wonder if he had. But still, I didn't believe the noises, even if Robert heard it. It simply had to be the house settling. In addition to Robert no longer making fun of Matt, he would also not go into his bedroom for any reason. When I was doing some dusting in the room later that next week, I called for him to bring me some pledge, and when he brought it, he refused to bring it in the room. I could tell that he was really scared about something. The only thing that I could get Robert to do was to leave the pledge in the doorway, and then he ran off. So obviously I was concerned that both of the boys were scared of this bedroom. For Matt, it was only on the nights that he heard the noises, but Robert was much more terrified by not even coming into it. Now after that, several weeks went by where there were no incidents, so I thought that maybe the whole situation was over. I guess that kids grew out of these sort of things. It was a while later, weeks even, when Matt was spending the night at his best friend's house. I got up in the middle of the night in order to go to the bathroom. We didn't have a bathroom in our bedroom, so we had to walk down the hall to the only upstairs bathroom. After using the bathroom, I was walking back to my room. Walking past Matt's room, I heard the strangest noise coming from his room. I looked into the room, and even though it was dark, I saw what looked like a woman lying under my son's bed. I ran immediately into my room and woke my husband up. I told him I saw a woman under Matt's bed, We automatically thought that someone had broken into the house. He got up and went to check it out. After checking out the entire house, he said no one was in the house, and there were no signs that anyone had broken in. It was only then that I thought about the sounds that Matt had been hearing under his bed, and that is when I considered that the lady under the bed might be a ghost, and she had been making the noises. Since the house didn't have a master bedroom, my husband and I decided to switch bedrooms with our son Matt. We actually had a water bed that you couldn't get under, so we figured if some ghost was hanging out under our son's bed, she couldn't do it with us in there. Whatever really happened, I don't know. After we made the change, though, no one experienced any of the weird activity that had happened ever again. I'm thankful for that. Number 3. Shilo and What the Haunted Hell. A cool southern October night would usually end in laughter with my 4 sisters, and I would try to outscare each other with whatever tales of horror, urban legends, or ghost stories we could come up with. I invite you to listen, as we did then, whether you think it is true or not, though it was certainly true to those of us it happened to. Nonetheless, I know my telling will be nowhere near as talented as a KOC cat or an evil black cat, whose existence I would not know until many years later. Still, I do hope you all enjoy, and at least get a twinge or two of those things that are not supposed to be touching you on the back of the neck, eerily caressed by ghost-like fingers. For us, it started out as small noises that most people pay no attention to, like the dishes in the sink settling in rapidly cooling water, or a slight temperature change or pressure in the air that makes your ears pop, or a rustling noise like fabric, or a noticeable slowing of time, or it could be a sudden odd feeling you get while sitting alone. Perhaps it's a spirit that just wants to be known, to be seen, to be heard, or at least to be acknowledged. Let me ask you then, are you ignoring your resident ghost? One night in the hallway, just outside the master bedroom, I had one of the strangest experiences in my then 15 years of life. The trailer was situated on my uncle's property in Little Rock, Arkansas, and was placed on an area that had a natural berm, which made the furthest end stand up off the ground, about 15 feet in the air. This end was where the master bedroom lay. It was supported with block and stapled down against tornadoes and storms, and skirted against critters chewing wires and digging under the foundation. My sisters and I, the 4 of us, occupied for a time the master bedroom. It had its own adjoining bathroom and a bathtub and a shower. From the bedroom door, we could access the main hall and the rest of the trailer. We could also walk from the bedroom into the bathroom, and from there into the main hall. The head of the bed was placed against the back wall, with its huge sliding double glass windows just above it. The view looked out over the man-made pond and levee my uncle had built many years earlier. He kept it stocked with fish, and had a pole light erected for night fishing. The light was set up with a timer, so that at sundown it would come on as it always did without fail. The pole light was positioned so that it hung out over the pond, but still not shone in directly through the large sliding windows of our room. We could have hidden the light with curtains, but because we all liked the soft, diffused, candle-like glow, the curtains always stayed open. Besides, we thought, with the window so high off the ground, there was absolutely no way anyone could see into the bedroom, unless they could either fly or had a very long ladder, and with the trailer siding being made of aluminum, we would definitely hear anyone or anything come up the side of that trailer. Back then, I had a bright old chocolate cream tortoiseshell kitten named Shilo. She was my best friend and a constant companion. She was born right under the floor where I stood at the moment. I was in the hallway from the other bathroom. She was born, along with her 4 other siblings, in a hole that had been torn into the bottom liner that covered the underside. I ended up having to move all of them because of the fiberglass insulation the liner would normally have held in place. She was the runt, one of those littler than the rest, who had to prove to the others that she was the baddest little kitten on the block, and she aimed to make sure everybody knew it. Her tortitude was always showing. She had a dainty little frame covered in ash gray, scorched cream and burnt chocolate, with 2 large, limpid golden, tarsier-like eyes that were somehow larger than her head, the exact shape of which gave off a perpetually scowling, yet utterly cute expression like, "So, you here to get your eyes scratched out?" When I first heard the noise, Shilo and I abruptly stopped just outside the bathroom door. Reflexively yet silently, I tossed my change of dirty clothes into the hamper, which sat in an alcove between the back door and the bathroom. My little fuzz bucket, tiny even for a 4-month-old, born the previous summer on June 9th, on a warm summer's evening, just before the sun was about to set, sat down at my feet, looking quizzically in the same direction. We were always on the same wavelength, although sometimes my timing was a little off. She was faster than me. After waiting and listening, we again heard the noise, and realized it was the bathroom doorknob, turning very slowly. Then the door, as I live and breathe, swung open, and another one of a few seconds later did the same, as if someone had just walked past Shilo and me, turned the doorknob, opened the door, and walked through the bathroom and into the adjoining bedroom, and left them both wide open. Taking a step closer, I craned my neck to look into the bathroom, but no one was there. Not a soul. I would have smiled at this had I not seen for myself what had just happened. I remember feeling this weird sensation, a tingle, that began at my knees and traveled up my back to my neck. It made my hair stand on end. The sensation spread across the backs of my arms and dissipated off the ends of my fingertips. It was one of the oddest sensations. Then Shilo turned her prominent, nuchal-crested, little chocolate-colored head and scowled directly at me as if to say, "Hey, Mama, let's go scratch some eyes out." Getting no immediate response, she stoically turned back to her vigil at the door. Protectively, I reached down to pick her fuzzy little self up, but Shilo, obviously not liking my answer to her query, sensed what I was about to do, and ran through the hall bathroom door and into the bedroom. At that moment, I mused, she and I had just used up one of our 9 lives. Hearing a sound coming from the bedroom, I nervously edged closer to the open bedroom door, my back against the outer back door that led to the outside. That door was kept locked because there were no stairs down from that height. Even though I was scared, I knew I had to find out what could possibly have caused the noise. At first I thought Shilo had knocked something off the dresser, but looking in at where the sound had come from, I noticed several drawers had been opened and rummaged through. Again Shilo flashed past me through the bedroom door and disappeared somewhere down the hall. She came back a few seconds later to hear what sounded like someone impatiently tapping with all 4 fingers on the bottom of the outside back door, right under my feet. Whoever it was, I thought, they would have to have been pretty tall to reach that far up. The ground plunged 13 feet from the bottom of the door. Then my mind exploded when I heard and felt the most threateningly hard bang hit the door, right in the middle of my back. Instantly, it shattered any sense of reason I still had, and made the tingles return with a vengeance. Somehow Shilo and I had jumped together to where I was now facing the back door, my back still tingling to the open bathroom door. That's it, I told myself. I'm out of here. The next thing I remember, I was standing in the middle of the living room floor, staring at the couch. My 3 sisters were still there, waiting for me to finish the scary I had been telling them earlier. For some time they had just stared at me, while Shilo, tiny claws bared, shimmied up my Levi jeaned pant leg to rest on my right arm, her tiny needle-like claws stabbing me back to some sense of reality. When I was finally able to utter a word, I couldn't tell if the reason they were looking at me so strange was that I said the word shit, which we were never allowed to say, or because they had grown tired of waiting for me to finish telling the scary. After giving up on trying to tell them, I convinced myself to go back into the bedroom and just show them. Together, we saw the condition of our room. All of our things were strewn about as if somebody had been searching for something, but for what we never knew. Later on we agreed that it had to have been a poltergeist, because it kept opening and closing drawers, closets, and doors, and then walking back through and opening and slamming the same doors again, going through the bathroom cupboards, and then back again into the bedroom. Whatever it was, no one ever saw it. For a whole week, none of us would sleep in that bedroom or tell any more scary stories. But eventually, after there were no other inky-dinks or incidences, we decided to venture back and give it and our scary stories another try. Being young, I guess, it must have seemed like it had all happened a very long time ago. I had just finished telling what in the haunted hell had happened, as Coochie's mother, Mrs. Cat Murphy, used to say when I got up to go into the kitchen to get some water. I drank a glass and filled one up for them, and then headed back down the hall. I had just gotten to the bedroom when I heard Shilo. Scanning the room, I saw Shilo with her lion's heart perched atop the same dresser that had been the source of the paranormal occurrences 1 week earlier. Curiously, she was in a semi-sleepy state, her eyes half closed, peering lazily at me through the opaque, golden light that sifted through the screens of the master bedroom windows. She gave me that slow blink that everyone who's been owned by a cat knows what that means. I gave her a particularly languid one of my own. Then, everything went deathly silent, and I saw this shadow-like, black thing just on this side of the window. There was absolutely no sound or wind, no cats or dogs, or hooting owls, no cars or planes or words or gasps, or cries for mother, not even any bug sounds. Our resident crickets were unusually silent. I wanted to yell, scream, or ask Christ to intervene, but I couldn't. I was terrified I would attract its attention. Besides, there had to be a reason, just like everything that happened the week before, that turned out to be a poltergeist. This, however, was completely different. Even though I was more scared than ever, I kept feeling like I had to get closer, because I had Shilo and Jesus to protect me. Then the eerie, muffled silence was broken by a sound none of us had ever heard before. A hiss, and then a snarl, and then a long, winded growl that went on for some seconds. It was Shilo. Her yowl proved to be more terrible to the shadow than the shadow was to us, because it quickly withdrew. Altogether, my sisters and I breathed a sigh of relief, for something that powerful to have come out such a scowling little thing was mind-blowing. Now I thought, her lion's roar matched her lion's heart. But then Shilo was born to a Siamese mother. Rapt, I watched the shadows suddenly fall across the bedroom floor, and then across my sisters' backs and heads. It seemed to rest there as if waiting for something. Transfixed, I watched as all eyes and faces that had been on me just moments ago now turned apprehensively to see what was casting the elongated shadow. Gasps of fear left my sisters' throats as each turned to view the large black mass stretched out across the bedroom floor. Within seconds, taking care not to step on it, they were suddenly behind me, their frightened eyes shifting between me and the thing invading our home. When I saw only inches from my feet what looked like its head, I dropped the glass and watched, as if in slow motion, the tumbler fall straight down, bounce off my foot, and pour out on the thick carpet, drenching my entire lower half with water. I swear if I hadn't known better, I would have thought I had just pissed myself. Unblinking, my eyes traced an imaginary line that ran across the bottom of the window up to the window edge. From there I saw the never-changing black form just outside, casting a pitch-black shadow directly through our large windows. What was making the shadow appear was further out and above, gliding in the air, as if searching for something. It seemed to have stopped, oblivious to our presence. I thank God it wasn't looking for us. I stood there, stock still in abject terror. The lack of sound was like being underwater. For a second I thought that I must have been breathing. I had to have been, but honestly I couldn't tell. Again the silence was so deafening and the image we all saw so impossible. No one dared make a move, not even Shilo. My eyes saw, but the contradiction of it made my mind rage like in a tug-of-war. Apparently my eyes won, because all reason shut down after that. My eyes took in what my mind could not accept. It was black as a moonless and starless night, a black so deep no light could penetrate its cloak of sheer gloom, and yet somehow I could almost see through it. It was moving in a kind of gliding motion, silently, effortlessly, knowing, searching. There is no word in the English language to describe exactly what it looked like, apart from its blackness and the post-hypnotic effect its appearance had on all of us, and that unearthly silence that always accompanied it. Also, I remember kind of a weird, magnetic pull to it. At one point, I had to use every bit of willpower to tear myself away, just so I could look at the effect it was having on my sisters. I had to know if they were seeing what I saw. I watched in horror as their faces seemed to distend and stretch, like the face of a man in a gale-force wind, or someone going downhill on a really steep roller coaster. I felt it in my stomach, too. I felt like I was going to be sick, and I knew if I didn't resist, I'd be pulled into it. As I stood there refusing to move any further, I felt like I had become a kind of penumbra, the vital parts of me hidden by the light, and my own flesh, and itself cloaked by the dark and whatever it was made of. It moved from right to left, outside the window on its way to or from something out there in the yard. Shilo, still dutifully at my feet, stayed by me, her face contorted into an expression of fury, her muffled yowls belying her own ability to move. Like me, she refused to. The sheer impossibility of it elicited a mind-numbing terror. It was the blackest thing I'd ever seen. It seemed to have the rough shape of the Grim Reaper, but without the scythe. What was particularly unnerving was that it moved extremely slow, stiff, and straight, as if it were in another dimension. I examined with my gray eyes the bottom of its robe, but it had no feet. There was just air. It was entirely black, with no detail. There was no face or red eyes or the presence of a mouth. It glided straight across the open yard and moved like it was in search of something or headed towards something. It was coming from another part of the property. It came from the wood. I thought of the stories about shadow people. Like the couch in the living room a week earlier, my mind suddenly woke to find my eyes searching for something tangible, something familiar, my familiar. For the first time, I noticed my Shilo's tricolor coat had an iridescent sheen. It was like it was electrified. I watched in awe as her bridal tortoiseshell colors changed from a dark and subdued tone to an almost rainbow hue. My Shilo's magic brought me slowly back to myself and her. Suddenly all sounds returned, like opening a soundproof door to the sounds of a death metal concert just on the other side. It was at once refreshingly familiar and terrifyingly surreal. Once we were finally freed from the shadow thing's otherworldly presence, you might be under the impression that I was thinking when I, with Shilo and my 3 sisters, ran the hell out of that room, but you would be wrong. No one was thinking, at least reasonably at that moment, except perhaps Shilo. She stayed loyally with me the entire time. No, the only reason we all unanimously agreed was to get out of that room no matter what. After that, and as long as we lived there, none of us stayed in the master bedroom. No way in haunted hell would I ever, under the circumstances, go in there, unless I was looking for Shilo. But again, she turned out to be faster than me because she'd already decided in that burnt chocolate-colored head of hers that she wasn't going to go in there ever again anyway. As to Shilo following the shadow into the wood, and that's another story.
Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to click the subscribe button and bell below, or click the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment, and share this video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.